Alleluia. Om Mani Padme Om. Allah
Welcome. You're watching Harmony and Diversity. And today we're speaking with Jim Allen. He's the Program Manager for Anglicare Victoria Eastern. We spoke with Jim last week and we're speaking about change in men's behaviour. One of the key words, if you like, concepts contained within that is the whole idea of abuse. Now that's a scale, isn't it? It's from a loud word to something quite a lot worse than that. Can you describe what that scale looks like? What sorts of things sit along that, from no abuse to being dragged away by the police?
Sure, I think it's important that people recognise, and we would talk about violence and abuse, and the reason we would use both terms is that sometimes people think of violence as being only physical or sexual, or what you can be charged for by the police. But yeah, it's a whole gamut of behaviours, and within each type of behaviour is a whole gamut of severity and intensity. So we'd often talk about physical and sexual violence, talk about social violence,
right,
putting a person's family or friends down, or embarrassing people in front of their family or friends, stopping women from going out, stopping them from having friends. We would talk about emotional and verbal abuse. So we'd talk about threats, putting people down, psychological abuse, so playing with mind games with people. We also talk about cultural and religious or spiritual abuse, which is very much about sending a person up because of their cultural, religious or spiritual beliefs, stopping people from going to church, stopping them from attending their spiritual group, stopping them from meeting up with other people within their cultures, of continuing to practice some of their cultural beliefs and rituals. Okay. All these ways of violence and abuse is about coercive control over women and children that men use. In terms of one form of abuse being worse than the others, or when we talk with partners of men, they'll say that physical abuse is certainly devastating and can send them to hospital. And yes, we know that one woman a week is murdered by her partner or ex-partner. So we are talking about a continuum of abuse there.
Yes, absolutely.
They'll say that the physical abuse is devastating, but the hardest to recover from is the psychological and verbal abuse.
Absolutely.
Sort of mind games that men play, and the things that are said, and the having the children set against them. Missing out on opportunities to be with the children as they grow through their different stages in life. Those are the things that partners and ex-partners say are devastating.
So with that range like that, someone who's been physically abused, well, that's clear. A guy that's doing that is he knows he's got a problem. But you get someone who's got psychologically they're bent, and they are abusing their partner on a religious basis or a family basis or a cultural basis. How many of them actually come in and are seeking to change their behaviour?
Well, what I'd say firstly is that it's very rare that somebody only uses physical abuse, because usually there are words and actions and threats that follow physical abuse.
Right.
What will happen is, because the men are invested in that power and control through intimidation, is that if the more subtle forms of abuse aren't working, they will increase the abuse, they'll increase the intensity of it, and they'll increase the type of it. Because it is the power and control that they're after, and men really need to see that is behind the decision to use violence and abuse. And to stop using violence abuse means to stop having power and control over other people. A big step for some men to make.
Absolutely. This is something which a lot of this behaviour is learnt from their familial experience, from their own parents, their own family. Is that the standard, pretty much, that you got to get a guy that suddenly becomes abusive out of nowhere? There's usually a history, isn't there?
Look, I think about a third to two-thirds of the men that we see in men's behaviour change can easily put their finger on a family background where there's been violence or abuse. A third don't. I think where we first usually see violence in an intimate partner relationship begin is during the first pregnancy.
Oh, right.
So I think that there's a key there to seeing how men who have strong ideas about masculinity and about roles that men play, that are transitioning to becoming fathers, there is a point of time where often women will report where power and control and abuse and violence first begins. Just frightening when you think about the vulnerable position that pregnant women are in.
Good heavens. It also indicates a large emotional hole in such men. So there's a lot of damage there, a lot of trauma, both in them and, of course, in their partners. Drawing out trauma and getting, as you said, a third of the men don't recognise the source. It's a hard work to get them to come out and recognise what's happened inside themselves. How do you do that? Do you have psychologists working with you, or is it something that just...
Well, all group facilitators are trained in men's behaviour change.
Yeah.
Many of them are social workers, welfare workers. Some of them are psychologists. So we have an eclectic field of people, of men and women working in men's behaviour change. In men's behaviour change, we don't necessarily focus on past trauma of men.
Just talking about the past. That's time. We're out of it for a second. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and we're speaking with Jim Allen, Program Manager, Anglicare Victoria, Eastern, and we were just talking about trauma and the role that trauma has. And how do you manage trauma when a clear connection with trauma arises in one of your subjects?
It's not unusual for men in the group to reflect on where they might have learnt certain behaviours or certain attitudes to violence from, and sometimes that is their own experience as kids. And sometimes they do get in touch with some trauma. We don't work with the trauma in men's behaviour change. We will acknowledge it.
Yeah.
We will say to the man that it's not okay that happened to him, and we will refer them into individual counselling to work on that trauma when they're ready. Most men, they like to complete the men's behaviour change first because it sets them some structure and some guidelines about how to continue on in life without being violent and abusive. And if you like, it kind of holds them together and puts them in good stead then to begin to look at other aspects of who they are and their identity. The fact that many of them are parents, and many men are motivated to make changes in their behaviour so that they don't recreate that same issue in their own children.
Yeah. So a guy's finished and he wants more. What more is there? What else do you feed to them?
Well, at Anglicare we've been running a program we call Dad's Putting Kids First, which is for men who've completed men's behaviour change and are prepared to go into another group which goes for 10 weeks with the focus on reparative parenting. So it's just a group that teaches parenting skills to men who've done men's behaviour change, keeping in mind, or getting them to keep in mind, that the relationship that they've formed with the kids has been one where there's been coercive power and control and damage that they've done to the child's relationship to the child's mother.
Okay. So that they'd need to have, last week we mentioned the fact of the disparity in many men between the feeling of their emotions, that there's a whole lot of emotions which are missing from their consciousness. So if you're going to be getting a guy to do reparative work with his child, he must have moved a fair way in that 20 weeks to be able to do that, to break it down into the context of the child's well-being.
Yeah, well, I think that each of the men do what they're able to do, and it would be our view that any step in the right direction is a good step.
Yes.
In Dad's Putting Kids First, we build on the skills and information and resources that they've developed in men's behaviour change.
Right.
So we don't have to do that early work of telling them that, you know, they choose their behaviour, that their behaviour is their responsibility. That's done. We don't usually, doesn't come up in Dad's Putting Kids First.
No.
What it is a very, very directed focus on children.
Yes.
And the child's experience of, and the child's relationship with their fathers too, but their experience of the abuse and the different sorts of impacts that can have over children in terms of the developmental stages that the child's at, how that fares in their education, their ability to focus and concentrate at school, in the young children, how that creates fear, as you were talking about before, but we might call it a hypervigilant, that a child who gets traumatised early on in life learns to stay vigilant to their surroundings.
Yes.
And the cost of that to a child that's not free to be and play and feel and do what children do.
Yes.
Talk about the parentification of children through a family that has violence in it.
Right.
Children can take a long time to catch up.
Absolutely.
When their growth and development has been stunted so severely by the violence. It's important that men understand where they need to step in and provide something a little bit extra for their kids to catch up.
So the relationship with guys in that second program, is that different? Do they tend to share more because they're talking about their children? There's clearly a love bond with their children, and they're actually exposing a love bond to other men?
I'm not sure if they share more, but I think after they've done 20 weeks of group work, they're used to being in a group, and they're used to sharing, and they're used to being held with that structure of accountability that's formed in men's behaviour change. So they get straight to the point. There's not a lot of mucking around and leading out.
Yes.
They're very powerful groups for the men to be in, I think.
Yes, it certainly sounds that. Now, so are they, this will be reaching out a bit far, I guess, but are the children actually brought into this at any point of this program?
In terms of physically brought into the group, no, we don't do that. We bring them and their voices in different ways. So in that group we ask men to bring along a photo of their children.
Okay.
To introduce their children through the photo to the other men in the group, because we very much want the presence of children in the group.
Yeah.
We do lots of role plays and experiential exercises within the group where we get the men to be children.
Yes.
And to think back for when they were children, to build an understanding of what children need.
Okay.
And in that
Right.
program, the partner contact, or we call it mother contact, continues.
Yes,
So we're
yeah.
continuing to support the mother and the children.
Mm.
And we're pretty much more interested there in hearing also about the mother's understanding of what the children's needs are.
Right, right. This is a huge amount of sensitisation going on here. It's amazing. So the women, as you say, you're in touch with them. Do they come in at any time? Is there ever any collective sort of group thing happen?
Yeah, sure. Partner contact at Anglicare is usually by telephone, but we do run some groups for women, creative art therapy groups and parenting groups.
And parenting groups and time groups. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and we're speaking with Jim Allen. He's a program manager for Anglicare Victoria, Eastern. Now, we were talking about whether or not children were involved. Is there some program where children are involved? Do you do work with children?
Yeah, at Anglicare we have the Peaceful Warriors program.
Okay.
Now that works with boys from the age of 9 to 18.
Okay. Mm.
And that was a program that began about 14 years ago because of the work we were doing in men's behaviour change in terms of challenging men's behaviours, but helping men manage intense emotions like anger. And our foster care workers approached me and let me know that there was a number of boys in foster care who were acting out violently in their foster care homes.
Okay.
And would I work with them? And because of the age group, I thought, well, best way to do that is to develop a program, Peaceful Warriors, that utilises men as mentors in the group work that the group facilitators do with the boys. And at that age, the 9 to 12-year-olds, where we start, they learn best through activity.
Yeah.
So it's activity adventure therapy that we use within the groups, but also we do a 3-day camp.
Okay. And that's actually arresting that repetitive program, isn't it? Because if you can correct that behaviour in a 9, 12, 14-year-old, they're not going to go on to be a father who does it, are they? Not normally, anyway.
That's our hope, that by working with the boys at that age, that and getting men to work with us, with the boys, that getting them to adopt some healthy constructs around masculinity. At that age, they're beginning to identify a bit more with becoming men. They're certainly watching men and the way that men behave and what men's attitudes are to all sorts of things. So men are very important in those boys' lives, and it's important to have men who've thought a bit about role modelling and mentoring and a bit about the boys' background in terms of the sorts of experiences that they may have already had in their family of origin around violence. So it's important that those boys get around men who can show them that being a man is diverse, that there's a diversity of role, that men can know what they're feeling, do understand about connecting with other people and each other.
And it's not wrong to be feeling these things. It's not anti-masculine to be feeling
That's right.
that way.
That's right.
Yes. It's so with those two programs, and this is difficult for you to determine, but recidivism, if you like, or success rate, is there any way that you've been able to say, well, yeah, we're having a 30%, 60% success rate in this?
Well, the research into men's behaviour change generally says that while men are in the men's behaviour change program, a physical and sexual violence altogether stops. That other forms of violence, there are significant steps to change, but may keep going. So important message to the partners and ex-partners of the men that we always give is just because he's in our program doesn't mean he's going to change his behaviour.
Right.
Don't balance your safety on the idea that he's going to change. Set a safety plan in place.
Right.
We want him to change. We hope he'll change, but there's no guarantees.
There's no guarantee. No.
And for Peaceful Warriors, it's a preventative program, so
Yeah.
it's hard to kind of measure.
It's difficult. Yeah,
But we do find that the boys learn relationship skills. So their teachers at schools report better compliance in the classroom and at school. Parents of the boys report better behaviour in the home. The boys themselves show us that they're able to pick up some of the ideas that we have. They feel quite held by the group and able to be the little individuals that they are. We know that the program increases their sense of self-confidence, self-identity. So I think it's an incredibly important and valuable program for those lucky fellas that get in.
Certainly sounds it. Now, this is a difficult question, but you've been around this for quite a long time. What sort of things do you think you could put in place? What's missing from men's development that brings them to this place when they're married, when they're in their 20s, their 30s, or earlier actually, but 20 or 30s? What's been missing from their life? Apart from the family example, there must be something missing from them, that they're not more emotionally sensitive. Is there anything you can see there?
I think, and it's beginning to happen, but probably not a lot. I think we need programs that work early on around healthy relationships in schools.
Right.
That point out that violence and abuse isn't okay and that there's no excuse for using it and that it's not acceptable.
Right.
And that at those early stages build skills in these boys about developing relationships and the idea of staying connected in a relationship. I think we need to teach other men to recognise the signs of attitudes that lead to men thinking that it's that they're entitled to use violence and abuse. We need to challenge those.
So it's really education, isn't it? At all sorts of levels, education and response.
I think it takes a consistency throughout the whole of the community to hold men accountable for their behaviour and to give them a consistent message that violence and abuse isn't okay.
No. So we've got the women, the wives, mothers in some instances, any feedback from them?
The feedback that we get around our partner contact service is that it's been very important to them and that they've felt supported through the service.
Yes.
Sometimes they feedback that men have changed some behaviours. They usually feedback that they feel a little bit more empowered and confident in their ability to stay focused on safety.
And everybody's been empowered by your previous interview and this one, which we've come to the end. Look, Jim, thank you so much. And at some later stage, very much like to interview again about these sorts of subjects. We'd be happy to do that.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. You've been watching Harmony and Diversity. We'll be back next week. We'll see you then.
Baha'u'llah, Shanti Om.